quite an honor. I'm basically new here to Singapore, and to be sort of welcomed with these types of open arms. So many of you here, and really getting the opportunity to get to know the U.S. I've actually been here a few times. I visited the garages, and really quite impressed by the university, what they're doing, and also what the country and how the country's pushing, young people to really innovate and to, be part of something new, create one of the, big new ideas. So, I guess the title that I put here, Democratizing Innovation, seems kind of fancy, but really I'm just here talking about my experiences, what I've been through, some suggestions, and a little bit about my passion, social media, and hopefully inciting you all to get up and be part and continue to be part of this type of innovation. So to kind of try to get the elephant out of the room, what do I not want to be remembered for? And really sort of, I think most of us would agree with this, I not want to be remembered for a movie. And I never thought this would happen to me. So you can see there, I guess, I'm someone else, and next to a partner that's actually not my partner, but I guess it happened and then it's there. And I don't eat chickens. That's sort of the other thing. But, one of the good things about it as part of this entrepreneurship process is at least it's something to laugh about, be entertained, and, hopefully it will, as I put there, inspire you really to do something new. But really to get sort of more serious about, and I'll just start with this movie just because a lot of you probably know, definitely not Facebook, but maybe myself and sort of the role of some of the individuals through this movie, is really sort of some of the lessons that it showed. If you look at the characters, what they've done, whether it's true, not true, there's really not a lot of money that we needed to start the company in the beginning. We were college students. I actually maxed out my account at $30,000, and that's really how we got to the first sort of boundary. I know here, just as an example, in Singapore, when I first moved in, I learned about an extremely long list of interesting programs where you can get a lot of funding, and I know NUS is one of them that helps you incubate the idea so you can get money very easily. So that's not one of your needs in an extreme way. And it's really not about your resume, about the books you're reading, about your pedigree. Clearly that stuff is important. I'm going a little bit too far, but that's really not what it was about. So what was it about? One of the things with us is, we really banged our heads a lot. We were willing to make mistakes. We were willing to take risks. And a lot of that, comes from sort of a perspective that, we were there with students. We were doing a product for our own sort of, marketplace, and we were young. We didn't have a job with us. So that's one of the things. And uncertainty, of course. And just as an example of how we would bump our heads, make mistakes, right at the beginning of when we were doing Facebook, one of the things that we really learned, first, we were its primary users. Second, it really was a case where we weren't driving a product, working on it for an extremely long amount of time, and then pushing it to people to consume it. You were telling us what to do. And one of the prime examples of this is when we launched a new feature called the Newsfeed, which I think is one of the most revolutionary features today on Facebook, which is really a compilation of all the news of the things that your friends and people around you and products and things that you connect to are doing during that day. People actually rioted. And you had millions of people create groups, the anti-Facebook newsfeed group, and you have people rioting in front of the offices. And there was really a democratization. And we changed, we made privacy, but that was an example. A lot of mistakes, but we adapted and changed fairly quickly. Another thing that is very important, that I think it's shown in this movie, all the time you have people around you. Whether, sometimes there's, disputes, non-disputes, happiness, humor, chickens, whatever it may be, it's very important to have someone next to you that will motivate you, that will stay with you during the hard times. Oh, it's getting a little bit out there. But, and one of the amazing things, right, with a lot of you here is during college. It's so easy to find this individual. Especially for young people, you're not, with families, you don't have, as the U.S. quite often, extreme mortgages. You can go and take the risk, and you can find the person that can really sort of be there with you in the up and downs. I guess now it doesn't work anymore. Is there a way to figure it out? Not a problem. I'm used to a lot of technical glitches. It happens all the time, but that's one of the things about making mistakes and banging your heads and moving on. But clearly one of the other things that was quite important is passion and determination. And this picture is just a little bit of social media and polling. I know this is not quite professional, but I just asked a lot of my friends, what do you think about determination and hunger? And I put a few photos there, and you can see that, that's just an example that you can look at. But really, if you think about it, you're never failing with a startup. There could be a lot of mistakes, a lot of hard times, a lot of issues with both your users, your investors. There's just a lot of dynamics. You're going to sometimes new markets, you're disrupting existing players, you're working alongside them. But one of the things you always need to understand is you're learning and going forward with it. And you can use that knowledge for your next startup and your next startup and your next startup. And hopefully that's what I'm thinking of doing now. It's hard to top Facebook, but that's one of my goals going forward, helping everyone over there. So, beyond these lessons that you can see from the movie and a little bit of my lives, one of the other things that sort of point out, and I just did, you are in the perfect place. Singapore versus not cold, which sometimes makes it very tough to go outside and speak to your users and really engage outside. But, kidding aside, there's a lot of resources here. You have a cohesive community. You can get to know people very easily. I mean, I've been here, less than a year, and I've really gotten to know a lot of the community that has been sort of involved in these areas. So let's talk about my passion. The area that I really love, social media. And I'll go through it, fairly quickly, but I'll just go through the space, tell you a little bit about opportunities, and hope that you guys can actually come in and innovate in this area. I've seen a lot of startups in Singapore, a lot of hard sciences, a lot of research intensive. There's definitely been a lot of social media startups, gaming startups, as some of the ones that we recognize tonight. But hopefully we keep going on this direction as well. So, social media, when we think about it, you think Facebook, not usually Google yet, but I'll explain why I had that there. And there's really a lot of categories. It's about the social graph, how you connect to the people around you. And sort of the other category is how you connect with the products, the services, and effectively your interests around. And there's really a lot of companies emerging in a lot of different categories, a lot of verticals. Some are niche, some are broad, and you have things like publishing, like Blogger. You have sharing tools that are very specifically about sharing. You have discussion tools. You have e-commerce sites, eBay, Amazon, that have done very well. Location-based services, networks, which is basically Facebook, gaming, as you've seen. And, this is an eyesore. It's not really for you to recognize all the names, but just in terms of the startups that I get in the pitches, and this basically just shows there's really a lot of companies going to the space, and the opportunity is huge. Really sort of to define it a little bit further, how do I really look at social media? And why I think this is quite interesting, and one of my passions in life to help entrepreneurs be part of this and companies to get transformed by it. One thing is I think it's really bringing individuals away from being just passive eyeballs, effectively, to active participants. Right? If you look at passive, we can look at listening, reading, writing. watching, that type of stuff. So I'm now writing, but you know, and that's great. I mean, there's been a lot of industries very profitable, right? You've had radio, TV, etc. Sort of in this category. And then you have the types of applications that are more one-to-one communication. And that's like my phones, instant messaging. And for active, you go towards more speaking, writing, you're engaged. And it's really sort of sometimes non-curated, one-to-many, blogging, social. And there's a lot of companies there like Twitter, Facebook that are very well known. So really one of the things is you're becoming part of the equation. And actually a few years ago, and this is a while back, that Time Magazine, you know, sort of writing, you know, welcome to your world. You're now really part of what's happening, especially with the technology space. You're part of the equation. And that's one of the big themes and motives around social media today. The other one is really moving from anonymity to identity. And you know, one of the things as I've been, you know, doing Facebook and exploring a lot of startups that I've thought a lot through is that there's always been a context. You've always been in some way identified. But there's really a gradient. And this is not like we're taking you from this anonymous person hiding in a cave to you're out there and Big Brother's watching you. It's really been a gradient of things. If you look at the first one, what you like, right? When you read a magazine about golf or you go to a website, Web 1.0 website, in some ways you're identifying yourself as an individual that has that particular interest. So some part of your identity is there. Then you have sort of where you are, and then you have a lot of the location services. And if you look at just the beginning of the web, 1.0, you had IP addresses, so they somehow knew you through, you know, some long numbers. There's some location around for you. Then what you want, that's a huge business right now, of course, with Google, but that's your intent. You're typing, you know, I want to buy this, or I want to do that. Effectively, that defines you in a way. And then you start going to even more identity-prone mediums like your communication, and you actually could start with just sending mail to each other. You actually knew each other's address and personally identified the cell phone one-to-one. And then there's sort of the question that's like very big right now for Twitter and Facebook, which is a lot of what we call the status update, what you are doing, and who are your friends. And that's really what a lot of these mediums are doing today. One of the biggest issues for social media, on the other hand, that a lot of people discuss is the privacy one. You know, how am I getting traced? Or, you know, am I posting a photo that my employer eventually will see? That's really how it initially evolved. But ultimately, meaning, it's this question. Identity is now getting pushed and made more efficient by technology online. Usually we're used to managing our identity around the table, around our home. How do we deal with it? How do we get educated by it? So that's something to always think about. So I'll just go very quickly about the growth and then I'll go through the industries that sort of are emerging here. This is, you know, just to look at sort of Facebook. I'm sure a lot of you are aware, and this graph starts actually, you know, significantly later than we started, but you can see sort of the growth rates have been substantial. We're over 660 million people today, and these are active users. One of the things is not really just about eyeballs, but it's one of the most engaged. Sorry, this is internet audience actually. And in terms of the internet as well, sorry, apologies about that. In terms of the internet as well, one of the things to look at, Facebook, social media, really its backbone has been the web. And if you look at the pace of innovation, the pace of mass scale for these technologies, it's sort of unheard of. I probably, you know, I wasn't alive for a lot of these adoption rates, to be frank, but if you look at the telephone, the radio, the TV, and this is looking just at the US as an example, you can just see how fast the internet was adopted to 50 million users, just as an example of mass scale. And if you look at this region, in particular, where you are, the opportunity is just massive. If you look at China, Indonesia and a lot of the BRIC regions, there's just tremendous growth, and you're seeing, basically over 1 billion people by 2015 using the web over here. But that's not really it. The web is a start, but that's still very small if you think about it with 2 billion people. It's really right now the mobile phone is also sort of a homepage, an access medium, and you have over 4 billion people as of 2008, and if you look at this region, on the other hand, it's just phenomenal, the amount of rates, and you see countries like India with very low penetration with tremendous mobile access, so you can really develop there. So now going to where I was starting, I guess I keep wanting to talk about Facebook. One of the ways you really look at the space and the growth is through the example of what Facebook has done, grown over 660 million. But it's not really about the user base and just the number of people. It's about the engagement, which has really been unheard of. If you look at the other previous large websites that have done very well, such as Google, Yahoo, you look as well as the e-commerce sites, people are not spending that significant of an amount of time there each visit and overall. But you're seeing just online spend becoming significantly large. You see China as, for example, 2.67 hours per day. But skipping this one, even quite more interesting is, particularly in this region, you have a lot of this online usage going to this space. And in some of, at least the countries in this area, like Indonesia, as you can see, which is fairly big. The business side, right? I mean, ultimately, as an entrepreneur, we need to, develop some form of business model for sustainability. We want to sometimes see exits. We want success. And there's a lot of ways to define it. Just to talk a little bit about the business, you look at a little bit of what's happening right now in the private marketplace. These companies are not even public, and you're seeing incredible numbers out there getting shared, and they probably are changing consistently, so that might not be accurate right now. And really how a lot of these models today, from a business perspective, have been looked at, have been advertising. But that's just a beginning, right? If you look at the global advertising market, you have close to 600 billion, but the online share of by 2014 just about 100. One of the interesting things there in terms of an opportunity is you look at the attention and the amount of time getting spent, and it really doesn't coincide with the amount of money going right now to, as we would say, the more passive mediums. And you have these new advertising mediums taking place. So what areas do I personally am very interested in, and I look at investing, and I think make a lot of sense? One of them, of course, is commerce, and I think they'll be tremendously disrupted with social payments and banking, communication, gaming, which we've seen some startups, couponing deals, media and entertainment, education, and least but not least, causes and charity, which I think is quite important. And I'll just go through a few examples here, quite quickly, but quite impressive. This is one of the most impressive statistics I've ever seen, and I was just awed from a gaming perspective. And this really talks about, from the title of the presentation, the democratization of the web. Within 43 days, this game reached 100 million users, which I think is almost unheard of in the world in terms of an adoption of a product, a service, or pretty much anything else. And, these are, complex games from a back-end perspective, but they're not that difficult to build, right? If you look at the equivalent from sort of the more passive type of technology, the things built by EA, Nexon, the games played on your desktop, less social and engaged, those games had extremely long development cycles. This did not. 43 days, it required extremely mass scale. From a business perspective, if you look at group buying, it's incredible how the space is growing. And a lot of you might be aware of the name Groupon and Living Social, or some sites like Guild. They're doing flash sale. But basically, these are social buying sites But I say that with an asterisk because they've achieved tremendous growth rates, but their implementation of social has been very limited. Right now, all they do is unlock a deal by having a certain number of people purchase a discount to a restaurant, a service, a product, or something else. So if 1,000 people sign up, there you go, you get the coupon. So we're only scratching the surface of how social we can get in these types of services, and you're having incredible growth in the category. And and really one of the most important categories, for me, that I've seen through the time, and I don't mean to necessarily use this example, has really been how, this type of medium really democratizes not just innovation, or really sort of your end users are, as we were saying, getting empowered, getting a voice, and this drives into a lot of directions for government, for charity, for causes, to really help people achieve important goals in the world that are there. And one of the interesting anecdotes is if you think about the way Facebook started. We started at college at Harvard University, and it was only one school, and we left it at that school for 30 days. But if you really think about it, before we had a paper Facebook published by the school that had, put this slightly, not pretty of our photos from freshman year in the first day when we were extremely tired and had met everyone, and we could never change our information. There was really no update for basically your entire time there. So Facebook in some ways at that point was a sign of us as students rising up and saying we want to create this medium for ourselves. It was an example of the beginning, but you're seeing this now over the world in a lot of different fashions. So I think that's quite important. So, that's really sort of where I wanted to leave at it. But, one of the big things that sort of I take off from my experiences first is, things happen, a lot of times without you expecting it, without you knowing it, and you get very lucky. But definitely, if you work hard, keep your determination, and certainly follow your passion. And I do suggest that everyone here, irrespective of your field that you're in, at least look at the social space, because ultimately we're born into families, we make friends, we live in a social world, and it's really an extremely important category that will affect everything. If you're interested in education, make games to help children engage better with it. There's just a lot of categories where you can make a lot of difference, and it's quite profitable as well, and you can make a nice exit. You can make your parents proud, your university proud, etc. But thank you so much for having me here.